Did animals suffer and die before the fall of Adam and Eve? In part 2, we looked at Romans 8:18 through 22, where Paul clearly teaches us that the consequences of God's curse in Genesis 3 brought great suffering to the actual creation. In fact, it's not until verse 23 where Paul addresses the suffering of humans. In this video, I want to solidify Paul's theology by looking at some other passages. Let's start in Genesis 1:29 and 30, where God says to Adam and Eve, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." Old Earth advocates, however, they argue that this ordinance doesn't necessarily prohibit humans and animals from eating meat. It merely affirms what they can eat. Abel's offering is often used to support this conclusion. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. Now, it's assumed that the fat portions of the offering entail a meal, similar to those prescribed in the Mosaic law. But the term fat portions is literally translated "and of their fat," and more than likely depicts the best of the firstlings. Kiel and Delitzsch make this clear. Cain brought of the fruit of the ground a gift to the Lord, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and indeed of their fat, i.e. the fattest of the firstlings, and not merely the first good one that came to hand. These offerings are not the fat portions of the animals as in the Levitical law of sacrifice. It was rather in the fact that Abel offered the fattest firstlings of his flock, the best that he could bring. Scripture often uses the word fat metaphorically to describe the best of something even when it doesn't contain any fat. Consider Numbers 18:12. All the best, literally fat, of the oil, and all the best or fat of the wine and of the grain, the firstfruits of what they give to the Lord, I give to you. And of course, wine and grain doesn't contain any fat. So in response to Old Earth advocate objections, I would first suggest that we don't read the liturgy of the Mosaic law back into the book of Genesis. And secondly, we use a translation that better interprets the text. The NLT does just that. It says, "Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock." Some objectors next point to Abel's vocation. You see, he kept flocks. But does his keeping flocks necessitate his eating them? Domestic animals are kept for other reasons. For fur, wool, and unfortunately for the animal, for leather hides. Of course, there is also labor. Agriculture is not an easy task, especially in a fallen world. No doubt Cain depended on Abel's work animals, just as Abel depended on Cain's produce. That a provision for the eating of meat was not included in Genesis 1:29 and 30 is made clear in Genesis 9:3, when this exact provision is added to its pre-fall equivalent. God says to Noah, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything." Genesis 1:29 and 30, in conjunction with Genesis 9:3, clearly teach us that God made provision for the eating of meat only after the flood of Noah. To suggest that pre-fall humans ate meat is to make the meat-eating provision of Genesis 9:3 redundant. Remember, God is not reiterating the provision of Genesis 1:29 and 30. He is changing this provision. He's actually adding to it. So more than likely, this extra provision was given to supplement human nutritional needs in light of the extinction of important nutrient-bearing plants in the flood. That humans were not carnivores also makes better sense of Genesis 9:2. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Notice that the cal imperfect denotes the future tense. This fear and dread is yet future. Yet, didn't some animals then already have a fear and a dread of man? Well, yes, and this would be especially true of those killed for hides or used as sacrifices. But for the vast majority of animals, it would seem that they did not yet fear humans. This is why the writer says, the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Why? Because into your hand they are delivered. God has now delivered them by virtue of his adding his provision to kill and eat them. Given all of this, we have every reason to believe that Adam and Eve and all of their descendants were only to eat that which God graciously and thoughtfully provided. This doesn't mean they obeyed God, of course. Given the wicked hearts of these post-fall, pre-flood humans, it certainly wouldn't surprise me if burgers and fries were on the main menu. As a final objection, some might say that only humans were vegetarians. After all, it doesn't actually mention animals in Genesis 9:3. But Genesis 9:3 helps us to interpret what God meant in Genesis 1:29 and 30. When God, in verse 29, says to Adam and Eve, you shall have them, that's vegetation, for food, he meant you shall only have vegetation for food, no meat. The context and a sound hermeneutic, it demands that we treat verse 30 and the provision for the animals in exactly the same way. So, in conclusion, in light of all that's been said in this video and parts 1 and parts 2, so please make sure you go back and watch those, the case for animal predation pre-fall is not only not compelling, it is clearly at odds with a straightforward interpretation of these early chapters of Genesis. Did you know that Isaiah didn't believe that animals were predatory pre-fall? That's coming up in part 4, so please make sure to tune in and watch that. So that's all from me, Ken Coulson here at Creation Unfolding. Please don't forget to hit that like button if you were in any way blessed by this video. And of course, subscribe and ring the bell so that you've got easy access to more videos as I upload them. And of course, it helps that Google algorithm along, so I really, really appreciate it. But the greatest support that you can give is prayer. Really, if you can pray for me right now, I really appreciate it. Thank you and goodbye.